Okay, there's no doubt in my mind that today's rip from the headline here on the Transplant Helper is going to be by far perhaps the most controversial, anger-inducing, argument-intensifying, questionable subject I've ever done here on the program. Okay, so just let me warn you about that before you go any farther. There are probably going to be a lot of people who are going to get their tail feathers ruffled, if you want to call it that, because of this article. And the article comes down from the New York Times, although there are many articles just like this. They're all drawing from the same news source. It's national news, by the way. But this article heading comes from the New York Times, and it basically reads as this. I'll read it right off the screen. Facing certain death, teenager with vaping injury gets double lung transplant. Now, if you're outside of the transplant world and you see any of these headlines, watch any of these things on the evening news, you're probably not going to read too much into the article other than to say, yeah, vaping is dangerous. Okay, and I think that's really the gist behind the entire article and news story, is to try to warn the public to the potential dangers of vaping, particularly if you're a young person. Now, I'm not here to argue that. I personally think vaping can be dangerous, obviously because of some of the supposed tainted vaping pods. It has been dangerous to people, but I'm not trying to argue that here or there. But that's really all that the general public is going to read into this or see in this. They're going to say, okay, this teen had an unfortunate deal with vaping. It injured his lungs beyond repair. He had to get a transplant. So there's the lesson. Vaping can be dangerous. And I think any positive thing that within itself does is definitely going to be a great thing. However, that is what I'm talking about for those outside of the transplant world. If you're inside the transplant world and you understand and comprehend how the typical or average system works concerning anything involving nicotine, you already know where the controversy comes in. Because in general, and it doesn't matter, across the board, all the way across the United States, any transplant center that you get in contact with, if there is any indication through blood work, through testing, through interview, whatever, that you or someone that you live with even is taking part in exposing themselves to smoking and or nicotine or even vaping in this case, you're not going to be listed for transplant. Generally speaking, you will not be listed. As a matter of fact, if they do find nicotine in your bloodstream, whether or not it's you who does it or it's secondhand from someone else, they're going to really just tell you up front. You won't be listed until you test negative for that nicotine for a 6-month period. Okay, and I know that has caused many a struggle by many people. Anyone who's inside of the transplant world, who sees these headlines, who reads these articles or watches these news snippets, they're probably going to be pretty aggravated with this, because someone who's gone in, who's been told face to face, you are not a candidate because you are a former smoker, because you have nicotine in your bloodstream, and then to see this teenager, 17-year-old, let me scroll down just a little bit farther so I don't misquote this, 17-year-old boy at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit was actually given a transplant, even though it has been acknowledged that he was a vapor and acknowledged that his injuries came from vaping, therefore involving high levels of nicotine. A lot of people are mad about this, and I've seen tons of Facebook posts where people are just lashing out, where teeth are gnashing down because they're fireball mad because this doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair. And here's a young man who got a set of lungs that should have went to someone else who was not, going against protocol, not going against the norm of what is generally seen as a qualification, a big qualification for being added to the transplant list. And I totally feel that anger. I've got one good friend, I won't call her name, but everybody will know, she'll know who she is, but she's been waiting on a transplant list, folks, now for over 4 years, okay? 4 years of waiting a lung transplant. Basically, even though she's been on ECMO before and near death, thankfully she's doing a little better than that now, but she's got no calls, no false alarms to speak of. There seems to be very little hope of ever getting a transplant. Now, by the way, I do think you'll get one, okay? I'm not losing hope, but I can see where it could feel like a hopeless situation. And with the average national wait times for lung transplants being at the 2-year plus mark, there's no doubt in my mind this article, this headline can be upsetting. Again, because many of us read it and we say, okay, here's someone who wasn't technically qualified to be on a transplant list according to all the standards we've ever been presented with, but yet they were transplanted anyway. Now, when you read into the article, you don't learn a lot more But you learn that, yes, this teenager, 16, 17-year-old-ish, I don't know if this has spanned the length of time or what, because I actually read two different ages, but nonetheless, that this teenager did vape to the point that their lungs were irreversibly, permanently damaged. As a matter of fact, the New York Times headline here has a photograph, supposedly, of this actual young man's lungs pre and post. It's a scary, scary thing. But we see that, and we think to ourselves, well, why would he be listed? Why would he even be transplanted to begin with? And in the article, they claim that the reason he was eventually transplanted is because he was so deathly ill that basically he got listed and he moved very quickly to the top of the list, therefore received the transplant. Again, the argument still comes in from the other side that says, wait a minute, what do you mean move up the list? He shouldn't have been on the list by current standards. But let me stop for just a moment. Now, I'm trying to think through this logically. I'm trying not to jump to too many conclusions. And all the information we have is what we're reading and or hearing via the media. Let's think this through. Number one, this young man was dying, okay? Just like you, just like myself, as waiting for transplant, we were all, if you're going to be transplanted, most likely it's because there's a major organ failure and you're dying, okay? So this young man was dying. He had no hope, apparently, according to this team, no hope outside of transplant. And so by having transplant, yes, he's been given hope. Now, all of us would hope, if you want to add that word for another purpose, that once he's transplanted, that just like they're using the story right now, that he's going to become adamantly against vaping himself or herself, that they're definitely going to be one of those who advocates against it, that they're going to stand up and tell their story and encourage and change the world. I'm going to assume that's what's going to happen, okay? Be a benefit of the doubt. That's probably what's going to come of this. How effective that will be up against this whole world of people who are vaping and not feeling the ill effects, I don't know how effective it will be, but that's probably going to be where this will go. So number one, this person was dying. Number two, we've got to keep in mind that this transplant center made an individual decision based on an individual case. Now, I get it. There's United Network of Organ Sharing things and all that. So obviously, someone had to go through some red tape, jump through some loopholes. There was a lot of work that probably had to be done on the backside of this to allow this young man to even get an opportunity at transplant. So I have to assume that somebody worked hard for this, that some individual transplant team, this one here being Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, and this doctor here listed, Dr. Hassan Nemeh, I guess he's responsible. He's in the photo anyway. But I've got to assume that the doctors went to bat for this young man. So let me ask you a question about that. Would you want your loved one to have someone to go to bat for them, even if it meant breaking the criteria a bit, changing the criteria a bit, or maybe stepping out on a very long limb for you or your loved one? I know the answer to that. Yes, all of us would want that to occur. Now, it doesn't seem fair when it doesn't occur. It doesn't seem fair that, that this young man, to some of us, got one opportunity that maybe another didn't get. And I get that. But, we have to consider that. So not only the fact, they went beyond criteria here, but I want you to consider one more thing. And it is the fact that, yes, this young man or his family, apparently whoever, has they've admitted vaping did this. The doctors have stated vaping did this, and that seemingly goes against the criteria. Let me ask you another question. Imagine this wasn't vaping. Imagine that it was you or a loved one who had been a smoker. We'll use smoking. It's more, there's more history with that. Imagine that loved one has smoked for a number of years. They need now to be listed for transplant for whatever reason, even if smoking caused them to need the transplant, which in the case of hearts and lungs and livers probably did. But imagine that they are in need of a transplant. Imagine they go into a transplant center. They're told no. They're told to come back in 6 months if they're clean. What if they do? If they come back in 6 months and they're completely clear, no signs of nicotine in their bloodstream, in their body, will they be transplanted? If they've not come up with another reason not to, more than likely they can be listed, and more than likely, eventually, time will wear itself and they'll get a transplant. How much different is that situation than this one? You see, the difference is not a matter of personal choice. It's not a matter of, and by personal choice, I mean, did this young man do something that hurt his body? Yes. Did the smoker do the same? Yes. It's not a matter of, anyone getting any special privilege, but it is a matter of time, okay? This person, and I'm using two scenarios, okay? The scenario that someone has smoked all their life, eventually needed a transplant because of such, and then in turn made it through the 6 months, smoke-free, nicotine-free, not exposed to such, bloodstream clear, and gets transplanted. The only difference between that scenario and the one that we're looking at right here in these articles is that this young man didn't go through the 6 months. That's really the difference. Did he stop? I'm hoping that he will be stopped. Stopped. Continue to stop. But I tell you what, he stopped when he went to surgery. He stopped when he went to the hospital. He stopped when he landed himself in ICU in critical care in need of transplant. He stopped. Okay? 6 months later or earlier, the situation comes up, then the one I'm using as a fictitious scenario. I'm just saying this. I'm saying this, okay? On the surface, it angers me and it saddens me that potentially this young man or any other in that situation, that they maybe got something that you or him or her or they didn't, okay? I get that. But there have been plenty of those scenarios. There have been plenty of times when, for whatever reason, someone received the gift of life that the next person would have gotten had it not been for them, okay? I tell you personally, I received the gift of life because I made it to the top of the list, because one man was transplanted the week before me and one other man died, okay? 2 people basically got out of the way so I could receive the gift of life. And I don't care what the situation was. I didn't want the man to die. I didn't want that person to have to be taken off the list because of death, okay? I never wanted that. You wouldn't want that. I want everyone to have an opportunity. So I get it. There's going to be some issues here. There's going to be some questions. I'm sure I haven't answered all the questions, but I do know this. This particular team made a decision, and they made the same type of decision that if I were in his shoes or his family's shoes, I would hope and pray would be made for me. Now, he's got to make the best of it. He's got to take advantage of it. His family's got to encourage him through this. And we've got to continue to pray that everyone else will get their gift as well. I don't know what else to do. So yeah, it's ripped from the headlines. I think the headline is seen by the world as one thing, by the transplant world as another. I think on both sides of this could be an advancement. You know, maybe they use this on our side, if you want to call it our side. I'm not picking a side, but on the side of someone who's had a transplant. Maybe they're going to use this and say, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't make people wait 6 months. If we think they're healthy enough, and especially if the damaged organ is the one being replaced, maybe we give them another chance. Maybe we look at this differently. I don't know. And I'm not saying that I think that may or may not be the way to go. It just might be. It might be a change that we can see around the corner. You know, lately, they've been giving transplants to people who have certain diseases. I have several good friends that they've had cancer before, but they got a transplant. What does that mean? It means a lot, because 10, 15 years ago, if you had cancer, even if it had been long gone and in remediation, you're done. You're not going to be listed. Things are changing. Things are evolving. Things hopefully are going to work out for the best. Now, let me tell you up front, if you're going to comment below this video, you're free to do that. I don't care what other side you're on, the one side who's angry, the one side who's happy, the one, whatever you fall in there. I don't care. Comment below. You're free to comment. I won't touch your comment, with the exception, if you want to use vulgar language or make personal attacks on this young man or the family, don't do it, okay? Do not do that. I will delete your comment. I will block you from the channel, and I love each of you, but we don't play that. You know we don't play that here. But as far as, free opinion, free speech, go for it. Let's discuss it. This is worthy of discussion, okay? And then let's stop what we're doing, and let's say a prayer for everyone out there who's waiting for transplant, whether it's heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, whatever. Anyone who's in need of the life-saving gift called transplant, let's pray for them. Let's pray for them that they'll get the gift that they need, and that we'll all be able to live the lives that we dream of. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, stay stronger, friends.